Good afternoon all, and thank you very much for the Nuffield team for giving us an opportunity to talk to you today and give you some colour to my Nuffield experience and how that has flowed through to what I've done since that time 14 years ago, which has flown. I am Brian McAlpine, 2003 Nuffield, and I'm currently farming at Latham, a full cropping enterprise with my wife Tracy, and talking to Dylan earlier on, and we feel that it has the highest Nuffield per capita in Australia, and that's something that maybe all the rest of Australia should aspire to. They say that you can take the water to potential Nuffield scholars, but you soon learn that they cannot make a potential Nuffield scholar drink. All too often we hear the excuses and the reasons why people can't do it. Yet a great example of why we must keep trying is that occasionally it does help, and I think I'm a great example of that. I received a phone call from Peter Nixon, who sowed the seed and raised my understanding of the opportunity that existed. The one part of the conversation that I do distinctly remember is Peter describing the Nuffield as like buying a tractor, suggesting that it was an asset that will repay itself over time. I thank Peter for it's a shame he's not here, but I thank him for the time he took 16 years ago and encourage us all to play our role in doing a similar manner, encouraging potential scholars. So back then I was 35 years old, heavily involved in our local grower group, and was pursuing all the latest and greatest farming practice and technologies just like the young ones today, except I didn't have a Twitter account for you all to know about it. Life was busy with 3 young children. They were aged 8, 6 and 4, or I think I got their ages wrong for about a year. And we also had a busy social life centred around playing sport. I didn't have any tertiary experience, and I had limited travelling overseas, so it became very clear to me following Peter's phone call that Nuffield would provide me significant learnings and value to my business. So I know Cameron Tubby will have a laugh at this, but I put my name down without a clear passion and probably not a real clear understanding of the Nuffield organisation, and so I also probably had no idea of the confronting and daunting interview process and the left field question that was going to come, like all the rest of yous. So that's probably one of my only guidance when I talk to people who are hoping to apply, is that make sure that you do understand the Nuffield organisation and what it stands for, but also to read and understand some of the topics that have been covered and what and who they are and where they exist, because it's an important part of it, what I'd suggest Nuffield is looking in scholars. So in 2002 I was fortunate enough to be awarded a Nuffield Scholar in the ceremony in Launceston, Tasmania, with 9 others, one of which was Heathing. These numbers were just the start of a considered and strategic plan to grow scholar numbers to where they are today. I do remember discussions about 10 being too many and the pool of quality of applicants was going to not be there, which seems farcical today when we're looking at the quality of applicants here this year with 24 going through, and there's been consistent. But anyway, that's where it was. Obviously change. We were joined on our global focus tour with 3 other New Zealanders, 1 Canadian and a French Fogwa specialist, Nicholas. Our cohort in 2003 were beneficiaries of 2 inaugural initiatives as part of the Nuffield drive for a more professional and wholesome experience, which is what you are generally getting today. I feel very lucky that I was part of both of these as they provided huge value. The first was the pre-global tour, I think that's what it was called, that was designed to give us a level of knowledge about Australian agriculture and to prepare us to be Nuffield ambassadors when we travelled. It was a 10-day tour that travelled in New South Wales and getting through to some presentations in Canberra, one of which I may talk about soon. The second initiative was the inaugural Truly Global Tour that saw the British Nuffields join us on a trip to Brussels and France for the very first time. I think it was much to John Stone's resistance from all reports. This was an amazing success, providing a fantastic window to learnings and opportunities. The British at that stage did not have to be primary producers, which added to the fabric of the occasion. I'm heartened and supportive of the Nuffield Fellowship and its potential to add another dimension to the rich tapestry of the Nuffield alumni and recognition that agriculture value chain is increasingly vertical. So the February tour went to New Zealand, Singapore, England, Nova Scotia, Washington, and then finally North Dakota. This was a year that the SARS epidemic stopped us from travelling into Southeast Asia. It was also the year that the Iraq War broke out whilst we were travelling, and it was post 9/11 security. Other topics of discussion was the failed demutualisation attempt of CBH in 2000 and the levy being put onto AWB to provide future equity. There was no thinking or conversation of us losing the single desk at that stage. But we did have plenty of conversations about the theory of the single desk and its value. So the GFP, it's of great interest to see that the GFP, listening to them today, and Robbie mentioned that right at the start, was that they're still getting to plenty of dairies, which we did. And by the end of our trips, we had an acronym, AFD, which I'll probably let you all work out what that stands for. But in all seriousness, the great thing about consistently going to dairies right the way along, which I'm sure you've all got that same experience, was it gave you a very good understanding of what government intervention and market distorting mechanisms can do to innovation and productivity. You know, we were in New Zealand looking at 1,000 rotaries milking cows and then going to a 30 cow robotic dairy in France, and then finally the most stark of it all was in Canada, in Nova Scotia, in a similarly wealthy economy, looking at a 30 herringbone milking system due to their milk quotas in Nova Scotia and their protectionists. So I've used that as an example to explain why you've got to make sure that agriculture can stand on its own 2 feet in the free market. So we all took laptops, could Skype, but we didn't. Maybe Heathy did, but we had some mobile phone access and digital cameras. The bit though that I think is amazingly different today is obviously the use of social media and how people have got constant communication at home, and also to be able to use it as a great almanac of your events. Our bursary was $18,000 with $2,000 withheld for reports, handing in assignments. Our assignments weren't peer reviewed or referenced. I certainly applaud Andrew on your comments this morning about reports, and because it's people like myself that do read your reports. Be warned, your report will be read, and we do use it to find out what the latest global best practice is, and also to get an idea of say some opportunities to be able to contribute to the industry and the positions that we hold. So one of the good things of doing this presentation is Tracy went and found from the dark depths of some cupboard my Nuffield diary, and I had quite an enjoyable period reading through it. And so there's one bit of advice is if when you're writing any record, make sure you write it in a manner that you're going to be presenting to other fellow scholars in 14 years' time. But there was a couple of quotes in it that I certainly enjoyed reading, and I would like to share with you that probably inadvertently have affected my opinions, and I reckon I've repeated some of these many times, not knowing that they came from my Nuffield. Some of these interesting, which I'd like to share with you, is learn to work on your business, not in it. No one comes to work to fail. Must have integrity and commercial mindset, no politics with honesty. Co-op failures is farmers on the board. I find that a bit offensive, but we'll elaborate on that later. Stay focused on consumer. If focus on commodity, you're stuffed. We don't own the land, we just borrowed it off our children. Don't suffer loss making. The day he stopped working and started thinking was the day he got bigger. The best time for co-ops is gone, which is very interesting because I think today there is definitely a resurgence and recognition of the value of co-ops. Loyalty driven by competitive pricing. Get out of perfect competition, which is also interesting being in the most elastic market in the world of wheat. Need to cooperate to achieve value they cannot do themselves, and their skill is their database. So this leads on to the next part of my presentation. So what has changed at LCRA Agriculture? Obviously, the first thing you do is get a flash emblem and an office outside of your house. I guess it must be mentioned that Nuffields can travel and become unsettled when they get home, because one of the great benefits of Nuffield is it gives you a chance to stand up on the balcony and look back on the dance floor. And this can be unsettling. You'll have a look at your position of your business in the industry, and also your own position within your family business or your relevant business. But fortunately, I came back positive about our experience and its place in the global marketplace. Yet I had no idea how Elsray Agriculture was doing against our peers, or even against other investment opportunities with regards to our return on capital employed. So we set about immediately implementing a key recommendation from my report, which was the value of benchmarking combined with a well-structured discussion group is a powerful tool for improving farm profitability, and it was great to hear Andrew Clark in the previous session talk about this. So it turned out to be a great process, and one I would highly recommend. It confirmed to us that the business had been profitable, had exceeded other investment opportunities, and we were as good as our fellow benchmarked farmers. But interestingly, when John put up about Warrakiri at 7% and 3%, all of us were returning very, very accurately and closely to each other, but what did vary was the percentage of our operating profit as compared to our capital growth. So we were quite high on the operating profit, which gave us a lot better cash performance, which you could actually use that to grow your business as compared to the higher capital growth. And interestingly, talking to Ash Weiss, who has just returned from, or has just been participated in the Rabo Global Leaders Program, is finding now today that it's been quite interesting that the operating profit is generally only been just above the borrowing rates or the interest rates, and the rest of it's moving into capital growth, which is the thirst in agricultural assets. But this was historical data, and this is in 2003, and as they say, past performance is no indication of future performance. So when we did our pre-global tour, and I remember this very clearly, I'm sure Heathy would as well, that when we were in the press club in Canberra, CSIRO gave us a presentation and put up a map about what the global change, or their forecasted global change, will have on agricultural regions in Australia. And I heard someone else mention that they've also seen a similar map being presented today. I think, though, Heathy took the knife away from me, because the map, incredibly, looked very, very similar to this. And Bob, thank you for, I borrowed this off your report. Thank you for that. And but it just goes to show you, when you're in Nuffield, there's probably a really good lesson here is, firstly, don't drink too much, and pay special attention to some of the information you're going to be presented, because it may become very valuable. But no, in all seriousness, this sort of knowledge and this map had put into the back of the mind, and it has been front and centre of both Trace and my consideration when we're making tactical management decisions, as well as strategic decisions in our business. So as you can see, Elsray Agriculture, we're up in that northern ag region. The ISO height has dropped, and so we've had some significant challenges of rainfall since we've done by Nuffield. So one of the key strategies to address lowering variable rainfall was to increase the capacity to cushion against the dry spells that are becoming more prevalent in our area, a la the bucket. We set up a full tramline system to minimise compaction. I've also just recently implemented soil inclusion plates, which is a poor man's moldboard, or spader, which is this here, and I think any of us in Western Australia are starting to become very familiar with some of these that we're all trying, and it was, again, John mentioned that as well. It was a good presentation. This is designed to address our subsoil constraints, to get line down the profile and address subsoil acidity as well as compaction, all designed to get better water use efficiency. But we also have been in and out of trading sheep. We've tried export hay. The only good thing we got out of export hay was a very good machinery shed. All right, very, very good machinery We also, to try and spread our risk, we got into backgrounding cattle, and this was a fantastic experience and one I absolutely loved. We used electric fencing to set up one of our farms, 1,200 hectares. We'd bring cattle down, put them on cover crops and then charge a weekly adjustment fee. What was exciting was that it was a low-risk income that derived much of its income in 3 months. Our farm was located strategically positioned to capture the northwest cattle market coming down on the highway and providing a cheaper feed solution than lot feeding. Our spring growth due to warm climate was significant over that period. So in 2006 was the first of our ordinary seasons, and quite interestingly, this cattle backgrounding was, I remember, $45 a hectare of profit, which was our most profitable hectare return. So it was working well. But as mentioned, I was very fortunate in that travelling after the world, I came back very positive about a business, where it sat in the global marketplace and its relevance. I also was very comfortable with the fact that government, we had lack of government support, which meant that we weren't exposed to external politics or activist risks that was very evident in my travels, and obviously would be in yours as well. So you imagine my shock when Ludwig put a temporary ban on live export, showing that even Australia was not immune to these influences. This put a quick end to this new cattle enterprise, as I wasn't willing to be further investing in something that's such a risk of activism. Mind you, Gina's presentation sort of gives you some enthusiasm to get back into it. So after a couple of years having a large off-farm time commitment, Tracy and I have downsized the business back to 1 tractor unit and harvester unit for maximum efficiency for machinery invested. The arable area now's crop is 5,800 hectares, and this is sown with an 86-foot air seeder bar, 130-foot sprayer. We've got a road train and a harvester with a chaff cart on the back, all very simple yet effective. And it was interesting after James Dempster's presentation and the question that Heathy put. So we did sell off a farm, and really we look at it now, it was about utilisation of capital. We have put some of that into putting some deep drains for our saline country, and obviously the heavy liming and deep ripping program we've put has been an attempt to try and get better productivity out of less land, and obviously try and get a better return on capital. So both Tracy and I are still actively manage the farm, and life is pretty good, and we're now looking at our next agriculture investment, very confident in the WA grains industry. So as Major Cooper exemplified, life is a continual journey of learning and personal development, yet is a step change that is built on previous learnings, I'd suggest. So following my Nuffield, Trace did a ED Triple P Rabo course. I did a number of other courses, including the Company Directors course. I completed my term as a Liebe Group President and had a period on the CBH Grower Advisory Council, and I served as a term as a Dalwallinu Shire Councillor, which I would suggest is the ultimate community contribution and gave us a good understanding of some very good skills. All of this was while we were still trying to farm. So my substantial travelling around the world and learning about the benefits and pitfalls of cooperatives gave me a level of interest in becoming a director of CBH. Yet I also learned in my travels that to be a director of a large and complex business, there is a minimum level of knowledge that is required to enact your full set of responsibilities. And I guess my comment in my diary about how cooperatives fail, it was based on the fact that it was farmers with not enough skill set. So I enrolled and subsequently completed an MBA, which I certainly have a bit of pride in that, because when you're self-employed and you're busy farming, it is difficult. So I think I've got the longest time taken ever to do an MBA. Before I started an MBA though, I was told that you don't know what the opportunities will present themselves from doing an MBA until you've completed it. And I would suggest that's exactly true with the Nuffield, and I guess talking to Nikki and Wade Mann about their consultancy opportunity is probably a great example. So today, a large part of my time is being a CBH director, which is an honour and a privilege to be able to represent growers and to be able to be a custodian of what is a fantastic asset for West Australian growers. So for those that are unaware, CBH is the largest Australian grain business. It's the largest co-op, and it's the second largest private business. and it's also Australia's largest grain business. It's obviously a very complex and large organisation. Its purpose is to create and return value to WA growers, both current and future, and is a non-distributing cooperative. It has a board of 12 directors, 9 of which are growers, and 3 independent. And the 3 independents is obviously a good best practice in line with my previous comment. So my Nuffield has done 2 things, and firstly, as described, has given us the knowledge and the understanding to become a director, but it also provided resources to assist us in guiding the organisation in key strategies and fundamental cooperative issues. Example of that is when we had a structure and governance review. I contacted Eric Voss from Rabo, who spoke to us in London on our GFC. I also spoke to Murray King, who travelled with Heathy and I, who now chairs a very large cooperative in New Zealand, to get his thoughts on the role of the Grower Advisory Council. I've also contacted Dave Brownhill, who you most would be aware of, on his thoughts when CBH was looking at investing up country in New South Wales. And I also have pulled on my own studies and learnings when we were making the decisions on the fertiliser investment. So CBH is going very well currently. We've just got a new CEO coming on board. We're about to roll out a $750 million network plan that will reduce our sites from 200 back to 100. We've just opened up in South Vietnam a state-of-the-art new malting plant, and it's the first of its kind up in the tropics. And we've also, on the back of our acquisition of Blue Lake Milling in 2015, we are currently in the process of building a 60,000 odd tonne oat processing plant in Perth. But the one quick area that I'd like to touch on, and Don McGeckie, on his oration on the first night, he spoke about organisations that have visibility over the full value chain more likely to be able to innovate on areas that have significant impact back to the growers, and I think he may have been more talking about an example like AOCO. But so CBH, due through to its monopoly position and its ability to have this through the value chain, has embarked on a more concerted and concentrated effort on innovation, and you've probably seen that come through with our blockchain trial with AgriDigital at BLM, looking at maybe provenance. But this is only a small part of some of the benefits. We're also looking at, and it was also mentioned earlier, was we're looking at partnering with CSIRO for satellite crop recognition technology that will remove the need for us to get grower estimates and therefore enable better logistics planning to further drive down costs. A new trading platform that is partnered with CME, who's obviously involved with the Chicago Board of Trade, has also been released, and this will hopefully provide growers with a transparent and trusted pricing discovery mechanism. All of this should drive value back to growers. And just before I hop off this, so down the bottom here, one of what we have done just recently is one of the difficulties of a cooperative is when your value in use is we've tried to set up like a quasi share price, and that the members will be able to provide scrutiny onto us directors and therefore management on our performance. But one of this, to drive down this new measuring of value and our new what we call our BPI, or quasi share price, whatever you want to call it, is to continually drive down costs out of our supply chain. But when you drive down costs out of a supply chain, it can only get so far, and therefore this is where the innovation is going to start to become very important. So why should we continually drive down the supply chain costs? Because there is probably a level of a burning platform for our WA growers, or even Australian growers. So early in the year, a couple of our directors headed across over. We've got a office over in Krasnodar in Russia, and so from there they flew for about I think it was a couple of hours, doing about 250 k's an hour. So it gives you the level. So on the left here, this is the sort of country they flew off right across all that way. And so you're looking at between 7 to 12 tonne capacity of all grains that you can think of as sunflowers, sugar beet, oats, corn, maize, wheat, barley. Highly productive land. That's the sort of dirt that we'd obviously dream of in Australia. So Russia was a net importer as recent as in 1991, and today they're exporting more than between 40 and 50 million tonnes. And as I'll show you in this next slide, I think that's going to probably increase. This is a recent photo that's come from Dave Forward, travelled over with some mates over into Ukraine, and this is a port in Odessa, and this here has got 6 terminals and can all load about 20,000 tonne a day and can load a Panamax in 5 days. But what's really interesting about the photo on the right here is this is a rail carriage that has just been picked up and put directly into a boat, a 70-tonne rail bowl that's taken off the chassis off the railway line. I just find that absolutely fascinating. And just talking to Dave at the break was that this port here has got 3 means of taking grain off a train, so if they really want to ramp these ports up, they can. So there's 66 export ports in the Black Sea, of which there's another 24 being built at the moment. So what does this all mean to the grain growers? So we're obviously looking at where the Black Sea is going into our market. So we use Indonesia and our flour mills in Indonesia to compare this. And so the Australian full cost of production is around that $250 a tonne, whereas the Black Sea is at around $220 a tonne. So with a $30 difference. And we're seeing the prices hitting our flour mills, that the gap between the Black Sea wheat and the Australian wheat is getting down. It used to be around that $25, but it's now getting down to around the $10 to $15. But it's quite interesting, just currently that has moved back up to $40 because they are having trouble getting grain out of their export. So obviously this still hasn't kicked in just yet. So my Nuffield experience is going to probably continue, obviously being involved with the CBH Group, but I think obviously the grains industry, similarly to what we were presented with the red meat, there's still a lot of, Luke showed us on the first day there the complexities behind the red meat, and Jerem pointed out as well the grains industry is in a considerable need for consolidation and a focus on profitability and keeping grain growers globally competitive. So in my case here, it's quite interesting that firstly you've got your purpose from CBH, but what's I like about this is from my global tour, which was a long time ago, I've come across this Farmers of North America, so I did a little bit of research on how they're going. They're up now handling 10,000 growers and have grown from outside Canada into the North America and doing very well, but their purpose is maximising farm profitability. I also come across Worldmarsh Farmers Group, and I had that little comment about their strength is their data, and they're a buying group, and you look at that's something that's very much underutilised in Western Australia is as a cooperative you've got the closeness to your members and the data of members, and we need to use that to benefit them for it. And the other one which Heathy would be very interested in is with GRDC and the conversation at the moment about it becoming an IOC. Since deregulation there has not been a full supply chain, and Jerem put up that full virtuous circle of value that we need to start getting and understanding our customer needs and getting our breeding technologies in line with those customers in Asia. So hopefully today I've given some support or foresight for the scholars who have just returned or are about to depart, with a level of reflection on my own learnings and how this has had an impact on my business, my contribution to the community and the broader grains industry. Also to the stakeholders of Nuffield, hopefully we've shown that the multiplier effect of your investment is real and over a long period of time. I'd like to thank the past and present leaders of the Nuffield, and may it continue to provide value to the Australian ag industry and provide the opportunity to many more young and aspiring Nuffields. As a scholar, you can determine where you put your energies and learnings into, your business, your community, your industry, or back to Nuffield, any of which should give you a great sense of achievement and something not to be missed. As Gina has mentioned this morning, at no other time is agriculture more exciting than today. So as Peter suggested, Nuffield is like a tractor, and hopefully that tractor takes you well into the new horizons of your ag industry in the same way it has taken myself. Thank you.